For those of you who aren't familiar, let me just kind of refresh you or catch you up. Mark Zuckerberg and most of the leadership team at Facebook, are a bunch of liberals. Okay, fine, it's America, you're allowed to do that. And as liberals so very often do, Facebook appears to have been busted censoring and silencing conservative viewpoints on Facebook. Now, here's the thing. If Facebook would just come out and admit, hey, we're left-wing, and we're going to slant things in a way to help propagate the left-wing ideology in this country and try to suppress and silence conservative or right-wing ideology, and they just admitted that's who they were, then, okay, fine, it's America, go ahead. But since Facebook purports to be totally and completely neutral, and they're not into that at all, and they're just a place for an open exchange of views and ideas, and they have no political ideology at all, since this is their branding, their imaging, it then does become relevant whether they actually really live up to that, or if they in fact are just a liberal shill for liberal ideas. Well, conservatives have talked about this for years, that you post something conservative and it ends up getting blocked from Facebook. Facebook takes down the post and then ends up blocking the user, punishing them for 3 days, 7 days, whatever. You're blocked from Facebook kind of as a punishment because you're violating our, quote, community standards. And the community standards are you can't have hate speech, attack speech, things along those lines. And how the people at Facebook define hate speech, I hate to say it, but it's very similar to how your average liberal in America defines hate speech. Because let's face it, if you are a liberal who is supportive of, we'll say, the LGBT movement, okay, you can cuss out some conservative Christian. You're an effing this and effing that, and you hate-mongering bigot. You shouldn't even, you don't even use your brain. You're just an idiot. You could just say the worst things about that person, and that's not considered hate speech on the left. Dan Savage, who is, he's the head of this LGBT group called It Gets Better. Savage is about as savage as it gets in the kind of things that he says. He's an open homosexual, and the kind of stuff that he tweets is over the top. I encourage you folks, well, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't encourage you, but if your stomach can handle it, go ahead and Google search some of the tweets from Dan Savage. It'll blow your mind, the stuff that he says about conservatives. Conservatives, men and women, especially conservative men like Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz and other conservative men, and how he describes in graphic, triple X-rated graphic detail the things, the ways that he would like to sodomize, forcibly rape and sodomize them, and have other people rape and sodomize them in graphic detail. Tweets and stuff. He doesn't get blocked from Twitter. Because that's not considered hate speech. It's merely someone with a liberal viewpoint who is calling out or criticizing and sharing their views, their passionate views, against somebody on the right. However, when somebody that's conservative criticizes liberals, they don't even have to use that kind of language. And if they did, it would be grossly wrong and inappropriate, and I would want to see a conservative blocked if they talk that way. But conservatives don't get blocked for saying that kind of stuff. Conservatives get blocked for saying a whole lot less than that, because that's how liberals define hate speech. If I say something like, love the sinner, hate the sin. Homosexuality is a sin. I don't support gay marriage, but that doesn't mean that we should have hatred in our heart for people with same-sex attraction. All right? If I say something like that, that's considered hate speech. I'd probably get blocked from Facebook. However, trust me, somebody can go on there and call me every name in the book. From the gay perspective, It's not going to get blocked because that's not considered hate speech. This is just part of the double standard of play. And this is what some conservatives have been rising up and speaking out against Facebook on. The latest issue just happens to be their trending section. On Facebook, they have a section for trending stories. And what Facebook does is their algorithms will go through all the different posts and comments and everything on Facebook to basically determine what is it that people are talking about. What's the buzz on Facebook? Facebook has over 1 billion. I think they have 1.6 billion followers or something. So of all these people on Facebook, what are the most popular things that people are really interested in talking about and commenting about now on Facebook? And whatever those most popular things are, the links, the stories, the people, the whomever, Facebook lists them in their trending stories section. And the reason they list them there, the reason that that's so influential, is because there's a lot of people who go to Facebook and they're interested in what everybody else seems to be interested in. Let's be honest, folks, there are a lot of people that are like that. Okay? Hey, what's everybody else talking about? Well, what everybody else is talking about, that's what I want to talk about. Come on, you know how this works. You know the old game about if you stand in the middle of a crowd and you just look up and stare into the sky, you know what's going to happen? A whole bunch of people around you are going to look up and start staring in the sky because they want to look at what you're looking at. This is just human nature. Facebook knows this. So what it turns out that they have done and been busted doing, because some former Facebook news trending curators who put this information there, they spoke to Gizmodo.com and they revealed, hey, here's how it works at Facebook. When the algorithms are going through and we see, here's the trending stuff, here's the stuff people are really talking about. If it's conservative people, if it's conservative stories, if it's links to conservative websites like Breitbart or like Drudge Report or like Newsmax or some of these type of conservative news sites, even though they're trending, even though they made the trending list, we don't put them in there. They don't go in. They're removed because Facebook doesn't want people to know, hey, this is what Facebook followers are interested in, because all that's going to do is cause more people to look at these conservative viewpoints. And then to make it even worse, these former curators said, and then there are other stories that come from news sites like New York Times, CNN, stuff like that, where those stories and those issues weren't trending. People in Facebook weren't really talking about it that much. And then we would inject those stories, basically lie and say that they were in the trending category to basically cause them to become trending, because once again, people will go, oh, well, hey, well, if this is what everybody's interested in, I guess I'll look at that. The very day after this news story came out about these former Facebook people admitting, hey, this is what we do, the very day after, coincidentally, on Facebook, in the trending categories was a whole bunch of conservative news stories, conservative news links, conservative organizations and things like that in the trending thing. So Facebook realized, okay, well, we're getting busted doing this. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, of course, he denies any of this. And he says, no, we don't do that at all. And by the way, maybe Mark Zuckerberg is innocent. Maybe he really doesn't know that that's what the people down in his organization have been doing regarding the trending section. I don't know. I don't know Zuckerberg. But I do know the guy's a liberal, and I do know how liberals tend to think. And liberals tend to think that the liberals can cuss out conservatives and threaten them and call them every X-rated name in the book, and that's not considered hate speech. But if a conservative merely criticizes a liberal without even cussing them out, just criticizes them, that is considered hate speech and, quote, threatening. And they must be censored, they must be silenced. Come on, you see this all the time. Look at the way that liberals tend to debate. Watch Bill Maher on his HBO show or any of this stuff. You know what they commonly do? You have 4 liberals and then 1 half conservative, half liberal. And that half conservative, half liberal, they end up being the conservative voice. But as far as actually having strong, hardcore conservatives, very rare to find liberal shows that will bring on a true, hardcore, liberal left-wing conservative, or I'm sorry, liberal or a conservative, a strong right-wing conservative let alone a 50-50 mix. Look at the gals on The View. You tend to have one or two quasi semi-weak conservatives, or even if you have one conservative who's slightly strong, they're usually surrounded by and outnumbered by a bunch of hardcore liberals. But there's not a chance in the world that TV shows like The View would have 4 women on there, and we'll say 2 hardcore liberals like Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar. And then let's just imagine 2 conservatives like Michelle Malkin and Ann Coulter. If that was a 2-on-2, wouldn't everybody agree that would actually be a fair fight? Ann Coulter and Michelle Malkin, or Ann Coulter and we'll say Sarah Palin, against Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar. According to the math, according to the calculator, that would be a fair fight. But you see, ABC would never do that. And liberals would go crazy. Liberals in America would look at The View if they saw that, and they would go, the View went all right-wing. ABC's going all right-wing. They would see that as tilted to the right. We hear this with the U.S. Supreme Court, don't we? Don't we read in the media that the U.S. Supreme Court is 50-50, right? With the death of Antonin Scalia, we read in the press. And liberals, go out there and ask your average liberal, what's the makeup of the Supreme Court? You know what they're going to say? Well, it's 50-50, 4 liberals, 4 conservatives. Because that's what they actually think it is. But here's what you actually have on the Supreme Court. You have 4 hardcore, consistent liberals who don't have any conservative blood in them at all. I mean, seriously, look at them. Look at Stephen Breyer. Look at Elena Kagan. Look at Sonia Sotomayor. Look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Can you find any conservative blood in any of them? They are consistent, solid conservatives. And you almost never, I'm not saying never ever, but nearly never will find a case where the 4, quote, conservatives vote on one side and then 1 or 2 of the liberals go over with the conservatives. Usually those 4 liberals are lockstep with each other. It's 4 versions of Antonin Scalia on the right. But then when you look at the conservative side of the Supreme Court, you don't have 4 stalwart conservatives. You don't have 4 hardcore conservatives. Here's what you have. Clarence Thomas, who is a hardcore conservative, absolutely. Sam Alito, who's mostly a hardcore conservative, not quite as conservative as Clarence Thomas and Antonin Scalia was, but still pretty conservative. Then you have John Roberts, who waffles back and forth. He sides with the liberals sometimes, like Obamacare, for example. So you have that, and then you have Anthony Kennedy, who's kind of in the middle, who just barely leans conservative, but sides with the liberals almost half the time. So when you look at the weight of how conservative the conservatives are and how liberal the liberals are, all 4 liberals are hardcore, solid left liberals, whereas on the conservative side, you have 1 hardcore conservative, 1 mostly hardcore conservative, 1 really soft conservative, and 1 centrist who barely leans right. You know, if you put those 2 sides on the scale, the Supreme Court leans liberal. But see, liberals in America don't see it that way. They look at Anthony Kennedy and see him as a right-wing guy. They look at John Roberts and see him as a right-wing guy. And they look at the 4 liberals on the court and see them as moderate centrists. That's how liberals think. And I think that's what's going on at Facebook, is that they tend to think, well, we're just doing a community service when we censor that right-wing hate speech. But we're allowing a free exchange of ideas when we allow that left-wing hate speech. Well, today, Mark Zuckerberg is meeting with Glenn Beck and Dana Perino and some other conservatives to basically call Facebook on the carpet about this. There's a piece I was reading about this that caught my attention, and I want to share it with you. This is from Media Research Center, what they have to say about this meeting today and what's going on at Facebook, and I'll share that with you next, a couple minutes from now, here on the Bob Duco Show.